If you've been an NFL fan for more than 5 or 6 years, then you're at least somewhat familiar with the Legion of Boom. They were the last defensive unit that had their own nickname that not just their fans, but everybody knows them by. Before the moniker expanded to kind of cover the whole defense, it was originally reserved for the Seahawks secondary. I've already done vids on the 3 most popular members of the group: Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, and Cam Chancellor. But today I want to talk about the other outside corner from the original LOB, Brandon Browner. He's the one who gets left off the thumbnails, didn't make the magazine covers. Even the president forgot him.
You may have heard about the Legion of Boom. Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor and Byron Maxwell, who combined to form the best secondary in football. You had a dominating...
For reasons we'll discuss, he doesn't get the same love, but played a critical role in establishing the group as a powerhouse. Every original member of the Legion of Boom was drafted by the Seahawks in 2010 or 2011. Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor was drafted in 2010, while Richard Sherman was drafted the very next year. Even if you extend to include Walter Thurman and Byron Maxwell. Thurman was 2010, Maxwell 2011. All drafted to the Seahawks in back-to-back years, every member, with the exception of one. Brandon Browner was different. This wasn't his first team. Matter of fact, this wasn't even his first league. When the other core members were still just in college, Browner was across the border fighting for his football life.
There is Brandon Browner. They went his way again.
He'd already been cut from an NFL team and had to take the scenic route to NFL notoriety. But when he showed up, he was ready. He was already fully formed, and he meshed perfectly with the legendary group. Since the group's disbandment, they've all taken separate paths as men do. You break off and come back when time permits. Life after football can be tough for long-time NFL players. The transition back into society isn't given a due respect. Sherm had one incident but has since bounced back, while Earl Thomas has had a bunch of wild stuff going down with him. Cam Chancellor has continued to somehow find this perfect balance between cool and intense. But what about Browner, the guy who took the longest route to get there and had a small hand in ending the group for good? He actually had the most career success after leaving the group, but had the toughest life failures after leaving the sport. Today, this is his locker room. This is his podium. And one day at the end of his 8-year sentence, when he walks out the tunnel, it's highly unlikely that the 12s will be there cheering him on. This is why Brandon Browner from the Legion of Boom just up and disappeared. Cue the Wayne. Today's video is sponsored by DraftKings, an official partner of the NFL. It's the last weekend of the year to get your football bets in, so I teamed up with DraftKings because right now is the perfect time to take your shot at the crown. DraftKings is giving all new customers $200 in bonus bets instantly when they place their first $5 bet. So download the DraftKings app now and sign up using my promo code FlemLo. To reiterate, new customers who bet $5 will get $200 in bonus bets instantly. And you could use that $200 in bonus bets to combine multiple bets from Super Bowl 58. That would give you a chance at even bigger payouts, but you gotta choose wisely. Good luck to the newcomers. Now, if you already signed up for DraftKings like me, you can bet on Super Bowl 58 and get a bonus bet back. So you can get a bonus bet in the amount of your initial wager, but keep in mind that the max reward varies. And to the folks where sports betting is not available in your state, you can still join the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy. DraftKings Daily Fantasy is a great alternative that also gives you a shot at winning cash prizes. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use my promo code FlemLo and bet just $5 on any wager and get $200 in bonus bets back instantly. That's promo code FlemLo, only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Brandon Browner grew up in Pomona, California, a rough area known for its gang activity. The majority population in Pomona is Hispanic, but looking at the Browner family, you probably think they was the majority. Browner has 15 brothers and sisters, and with that many people, personalities, and moods intertwining every day, there will be inherent chaos. With a busy environment at home, a busy environment in the streets, and a loud, frantic environment on the football field, Brandon wouldn't deal with silence, wouldn't deal with himself until... You see where I'm going, bro. More on that later. But based on the way Brandon talks about his childhood, I don't really believe it was one without love, but with most of his family members, quote, in the life, and Brandon feeling his mom was physically abusive. Dude grew up with a trauma that he never healed from, and the temporary bandages he wrapped his wounds with would eventually become soaked and overflowed. This wasn't gonna work forever. He needed to address the source. Brandon's bandage of choice was of course football, a game well suited for young boys looking for somewhere to place their aggression without consequence. Brandon had aggression built up from the environment he grew up in. That's how he saw family members earn their respect in the streets. Brandon says even the way his mom disciplined him was aggressive, overly so in his opinion, and he harbored some resentment.
I always hate to use the term child abuse because, you know, that's what my mom knew. She ruled with iron fist. You know, she was real strict. Ass whoopings were common around my household. Growing up, I seen no problem with it because it made me tough. Fell right into place. You know, I was very aggressive, played with a lot of passion. Outside of things I was going through in the house, you know, having the football field was a way to let out some of the aggression, some of the things I wasn't bold enough to say back to my mom when accepting the abuse. I took it out on others.
That interview clip is from a video by the Crop Organization YouTube channel. For the full thing, I left the link down in the description. So if you want more of Brandon's words, I'd advise you to check it out. At 6'4", 190, Brandon developed into a 3-star prospect who played corner and receiver. On the field, when he was able to let all his emotion out, high school Brandon Browner was an unstoppable force. When you first start playing football, some kids have a hard time going to that place mentally that lets you play free. But some other kids have the opposite issue. They have a hard time not remaining in that space once the game is over. Brandon was the latter. Here's a quote from his old coaches. This is from an article published by The Athletic. It was written by Michael Sean Ducker back in May of 2020, and I'm gonna reference this a lot throughout this video. And it is linked in the description if you want to read the whole thing. He only knows one way, just like he knows one way to play the game. If you look at Brandon and his aggression on the field, it was no different than his aggression off the field. As long as he had football, all his aggressive acts off the field could be overlooked or contained thanks to what he can do on it.
Fighting and get suspended from school. I went ineligible with my grades 2 or 3 times in high school, you know, but because I was a good athlete, I had people that overlooked some of my situations, my issues, because they needed me on a Friday or a Saturday for a game.
He wasn't forced at this point to deal with his issues, which for most of us, that's the only way we're gonna actually do it. And that could be through therapy or simple self-reflection, acknowledging the fact that we are all flawed and accepting that journey towards self-improvement. But when our bad habits and behaviors that we formed in childhood get pacified too much, in certain facets, we become an overgrown kid. You a man in every facet, you know what I'm saying? You paying bills, you taking care of responsibilities, but emotionally though, you still haven't made it to that place you need to be able to deal with adversity as a grown man. And that boyhood problem that you never dealt with is in constant conflict with the man you've become. And what happened with that conflict is slowly over time, it breaks you down from the inside out. But back in 2002, it didn't matter that the dark source of Brandon's aggression would one day consume him. At that time, it just meant that he was one hell of a freshman at Oregon State who even had the upperclassmen shook. They had to teach him how to practice because early in his college career, this man would be at practice trying to decapitate his own teammates. But after a redshirt year under the tutelage of then OSU DB coach Nigel Burton, Brandon was able to point that aggression in the right direction, and man, dude was a beast. Brandon and Coach Burton had something similar to a father-son relationship, as Coach Burton tried to help Brandon separate the game on the field from real life. He wanted him to benefit from the game but not be consumed by it. Coach Burton often wonders if he was too hard on Brandon, but ultimately really just wanted the best for dude. Quote, "It was out of love. I just wanted him to succeed and use the game as a tool and not be engulfed in it." His choice of words lines up perfectly with what we've discussed up to this point in the video, with Brandon not being able to separate the way he dealt with emotions on the field and how he dealt with them off of it. But as much as he tried, Coach never fully got that message to really get through to Brandon. And like most of us misunderstanding things parental figures tell us, it's not 2 years later where we're like, that's what he meant. But after 2 years of college, the physical corner had amassed a total of 87 tackles, 15 deflections, 6 interceptions, and even though he played corner a couple TFLs. Coach Burton felt this was a great foundation, a phenomenal start to Brandon's college career. But Brandon wasn't trying to hear about no great foundation. To him, it was a great career, point blank period. After 2 years of college, Brandon wanted to declare for the 2005 NFL Draft. Coach Burton stepped in and told him it was a mistake, but at the time, hard truth wasn't a language Brandon spoke. So he took it as a slight, distanced himself from Coach Burton, and didn't speak to him again for years after that. But Brandon did have his reasons for wanting to leave school, reasons that include but are not limited to finances. Brandon just didn't believe he was going to be eligible for his junior season due to his academics. He had probably already decided in his mind that this was his last year and hadn't been going to classes. So that character checks NFL scouts like to do when they come ask around your college, it probably didn't go well. Then at the NFL Combine as a cornerback, this man ran a 4.68. Now he was 6'4", 220. He ain't need a 4.2, but 4.68 is really slow. And his relative athletic score was a 5.2 out of a possible 10. That's a problem. Bro, I never even knew this man played for the Broncos, but that's who signed him as an undrafted free agent in 2005. And as you already know, an undrafted free agent faces a crazy uphill battle trying to make the final roster. So when you break your arm in your first preseason, your NFL career could easily be over. But Brandon wasn't cut initially, he was placed on IR, but then he failed the drug test and yeah, that was it. Brandon had gotten his chance and it hadn't worked out. So he went back to Pomona where he got his girl pregnant, and now as you'd imagine, those thoughts of being a father with no career path came with endless anxiety. Brandon didn't even know who he was without football, so he wondered how on earth he was supposed to raise a kid. With no answer to speak of course the kid came anyway. Once you bring them into the picture, bro, you on their time. In 2007, when this Legion of Boom brothers were truly just beginning their football journeys, Brandon's was over. He was a regular dad living off unemployment checks trying to figure out life. But before he even began to really figure it all out, before he dove deep to close the wounds left unattended from his childhood, less than 1 year after his first child was born, guess who got a fresh bandage to cover his wounds again? He got a call from the CFL, hopped on a plane, and once again became immersed in the beautiful violence. He played in the CFL from 2006 to 2010, and in each of his last 3 years, he was a CFL All-Star. He also had team success because in 2008, his team won the Grey Cup, the CFL Super Bowl. One of his coaches spoke on how elated Brandon was. Of course, you're happy when you win the championship, but this was something deeper. Here's a quote from one of his coaches. He was so thankful. It was almost like it validated him as a person. To follow through with something and be able to finish and complete something, it was just good to be able to be involved in something like that with someone who feels hollow and you feel that little blank. Okay, excuse my sensitivity, but I thought that shit was beautiful. I love when people can look beyond just what's on the surface. The problem for Brandon was the fact that the little blank that was filled in wasn't filled in permanently, because football can't do that. One day it ends, and as soon as it does, if that space ain't filled in with actual life, the hollow feeling comes back, and then in an attempt to fill it, most of us eventually turn to alternative sources. Brandon was struggling to keep his aggression in check on the football field. Dude was constantly fighting with opponents and teammates. He fought with coaches, stayed angry, and got called for hella penalties, which shouldn't be too shocking because when he made it to the NFL, he led the league in penalties, I think his first year. But in the CFL, it was even deeper than that. Dude had an ongoing beef with his road game roommate, right? So that was the person you would room with during away games. You damn near needed a referee to sleep in a room with these dudes. But one story told in the Athletic article I've constantly referenced sums up perfectly why coaches deal with a player like Brandon. So in 2010, Brandon's coach wanted to move him to slot corner for one game to match up against Andy Fantuz. The last time Brandon's coach went against Fantuz, dude went off for 255 receiving yards. Now, Brandon was hot because he always relied on jamming receivers and mauling them off the line. In the slot, he felt he wasn't going to be able to do that, so he lashed out at his coach in complete frustration. Brandon's coaching maybe not the most sophisticated way, but in a way that worked better than you might think. He handled the situation. He taunted Brandon, basically saying that he was running from the matchup. Now Brandon was in another battle. A battle against his pride. And every man watching this know who won that battle. After going off, Brandon of course accepts the challenge and actually holds Fantus to 0 catches. So while he could be a headache, he could also take a guy who went for 255 and hold him to nothing. Okay, this brings us back to the formation of the Legion. Yes, Brandon went through all of that before even showing up on our radar. In 2011, Richard Sherman was drafted and added to a secondary with Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas. After that 2011 draft, the Seattle Seahawks unknowingly picked up the final piece of an all-time great secondary when they signed CFL unknown Brandon Browner. Now remember, in the CFL, Brandon Browner was a guy who at times would get in fights with his own teammates. And he came to Seattle with that same energy, but the energy he gave off wasn't reciprocated. It wasn't reciprocated, but they also weren't scared of the energy. Apparently, most of the defense felt the exact same way. So when Brandon tried to isolate himself at the offseason program, it really didn't go like he expected it would. At lunch, he sat down alone. He wasn't here to form bonds. He was there to take somebody's job by any means necessary. But just as he had that thought, one of the guys whose job he was directly trying to take came and sat at his table. It was 5th round rookie cornerback Richard Sherman. Him and Brandon was going for essentially the same spot. Sherman was loud and aggressive, but clearly came in peace. He said to Brandon, "You ain't about to sit by yourself." It took a while, but eventually Brandon let his guard down. He didn't know it, but this was the start of his new family. The two became fast friends, and the 2011 class would soon bond with the 2010 class. Once that happened, the league was in trouble, because they was all kind of crazy, in a good way.
LOB, we run this league. LOB, get a t-shirt. No, we on our feet. Like, get a t-shirt.
We went to play basketball at LA Fitness, and that was the first time something kind of felt special about the group.
We all ended up on the same team. Yeah, we were all on the same team playing against like NBA players, and it's all these hoopers, and
we just played good defense. Yeah, the offense kind of came. Cam, we played great defense, we communicated well. It just like felt like really natural and really, it's hard to describe. You know, it felt special. And you're like, man, we've never met each other. We've never done anything together. And it feels like we've been together 5 years.
By 2012, the group had fully bonded. In 2013, they laid the foundation for their legendary status. But when the Seahawks made their run to Super Bowl 48, Brandon Browner unfortunately would not be with them. Remember, back in 2005, during his first brief stint in the NFL, Brandon had been cut after failing a drug test. Well, in 2012, he was popped for utilizing Adderall, which is on the NFL's banned substance list. So then in 2013, he tests positive for PEDs while trying to recover from an injury. It was at this point where things got complex. This meant that Brandon was now a stage 3 offender, in the drug program. That meant a 2-game suspension was out of the question. It's kind of similar in a way to the 3 strikes law. Brandon instead would be suspended for the rest of the season, including a potential postseason run. Missing a run so essential to the legend of the group would make Brandon an outsider to his newfound family. Surely one single run wouldn't ostracize dude. Well, that kind of depends on how long the run is. Of course, that run would be a sprint straight to the Super Bowl, where the LOB shined without one of their founding members. Brandon became known at best as the 4th forgotten member, but some people didn't recognize my dude at all. When they took their trip to the White House and President Obama shouted out the Legion of Boom, you may not have noticed before, but now that you're watching this video from Brandon's perspective, I want you to listen to this snippet of this speech once again.
You may have heard about the Legion of Boom. Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor and Byron Maxwell, who combined to form the best secondary in football. You had a dominating defensive line with guys like Michael Bennett.
Damn, bro, look at Brandon's face as he's completely left off, as cornerback Byron Maxwell had replaced Brandon in the lineup for all the Seahawks' biggest games. And for a guy whose identity was tied up in football to be erased from history in a sense, bro, you know that had to hurt. Now you sitting up there trying to look all happy, probably sweating through your suit because you don't know what to feel. He looks like a guy who has just been embarrassed. And you can judge all you want, but that's a tough thing to deal with. He never played for the Seahawks again after that, but his football career wasn't done just yet. He signed with the Patriots, and by the end of the year, he found himself where he truly wanted to be all along, at the Super Bowl with his Legion of Boom brothers. Only now, Brandon was playing on a different team.
Our offense up. When we turned up, they turn up. I'm trying to tell you, man. Turn up. Hey, can we please turn up? Please. Come on.
In one of the most infamous plays in Super Bowl history, Brandon played a role in ending the run of his former team. If you want to point to a play that broke not just the Legion of Boom, but broke that whole Seahawks team down as a whole, it was this one where Pete doesn't give the ball to Marshawn, Russell throws the pick, and the team unity breaks. After that play, things was never close to the same, and a decade later they're still all trying to process that loss. But for one of the group's members, it was a whole different experience.
Kiss the ring! Kiss the ring!
I don't know what they're gonna call us now.
I think
Champion!
championship!
Brandon Browner, toughest quarterback I've ever played with.
He was now a two-time Super Bowl champ, a Grey Cup champ, and he was both a founding member and one of the forces that ended the Legion of Boom. And when that ain't filled a void, Brandon knew he was in trouble. He signed with the Saints, but at that point in his career, Brandon was honestly just a shell of himself. But he got a nice final payday on his way out, and by 2016, he was out of football. He went back home to Pomona and held football camps that Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman both showed up to. It's cool to see that even after their relationship got complicated, they still showed up for their brother, you know what I'm saying? That's dope to see. Had Brandon moved to Seattle, where many of his old teammates now called home, he would have been around family. But because it ended so weird and then got even weirder, he probably wasn't comfortable in that environment anymore. But back home, he was around his actual family, and many of those relationships were strained and unhealthy. I haven't said this in a while, but it's time to repeat it, because I still get these same type of comments all the time. But bro, if you take a person who's not in a large group, who's alone and reflective and giving an honest answer, and you ask that person, does money equal happiness? Unless they're painfully shallow, the answer will be no. Because you can't buy fulfillment, and without that fulfillment, once the novelty of buying shit finally wears off, you ultimately will return to that unhappy state. For proof, all you need to do is look at some of your favorite celebrities. Brandon, like many of us, couldn't find that fulfillment. This is despite the money he had and all the things he had accomplished. So slowly over time, he fell into that dark space that no level of aggression was gonna get him out of. Brandon finally got to the point where there were no more bandages big enough to cover the wounds he still hadn't dealt with. Bro, the wounds had morphed, you know what I'm saying? They've been infected and they spread, affecting other areas in his life, growing quickly out of control. He tried therapy and different programs, but it just wasn't enough. He asked his mom to attend with him, but she politely declined. In 2017, the two-time Super Bowl champ and a founding member of the Legion of Boom was arrested for possession of a controlled substance, which according to some sources was actually cocaine. Brandon's life spiraled and would continue to get worse as things escalated at warp speed. It was crazy. This is when things get really dark, and that aggression that Brandon was never able to separate from the game came to haunt him. According to The Athletic, 4 months after being arrested for cocaine possession, Brandon was arrested again. He allegedly attacked his one-time girlfriend, and bro, he messed her up pretty damn bad. 2 black eyes, broken tailbone, busted eardrum, and he threatened to kill her. He was placed on probation in order to take a domestic violence class, but it wasn't enough. The lesson wasn't sinking in. A few weeks later, police get reports of a man trying to break into this same woman's home through a locked window. We now know this person was Brandon. Dude breaks into the house, and his girlfriend is there with her 2 kids. Then when she tried to take the kids and just leave the house, according to reports, Brandon once again threatened to kill her. And he didn't just threaten, he grabbed the back of her head and pushed her face into the carpet and tried to smother her to death. She survived and would recover, physically at least, but now she's got her own trauma that she'll be carrying forward. Not to mention the trauma that the kids are gonna feel seeing their mom in danger like that. I really can't imagine. Plus, she's raising them so the trauma she feels will also affect them like Brandon's mom's trauma once affected him. So this is what happens when you don't deal with your shit. You continue this cycle and it really never stops. I'm not saying that it's easy, bro. I swear that ain't my point. I'm just saying it's important and it starts with yourself. And this is a quick case I'll make to all the fellas out there watching. Bro, ain't nothing wrong with being an alpha male in a traditional sense. But this new wave has distorted and bastardized the term. One of the main flaws with the new wave people are defining alpha male is denying the fact that we got heavy emotions we gotta learn how to deal with. If you ever screamed at your TV, use emotional. If you ever toss one of these, use emotional. If you a living, breathing human, you emotional. So you can keep lying to yourself and you can learn how to deal with them shits healthy. Now, when you don't learn how to process them emotions, then you can't communicate effectively on a deep level. When you can't communicate effectively, you feel misunderstood. It's like a baby crying. You don't know if he's sleepy, hungry, or need his diaper change. The baby's doing that because not being able to communicate effectively is really frustrating because don't nobody understand what you're trying to say. Over a short period of time, that builds into rage, which is not always the most effective tool to get the job done. Now, rage is needed sometimes, like somebody got your family hostage or you fighting for your life, maybe even playing football. But when you dealing with your relationship and your only communication is nonchalant indifference or I'm up here rage with nothing in between, me, you're a lot less logical and way more emotional than you probably realize. And it's important to learn how to control this because we way too powerful to be wielding that power recklessly. You see what I'm saying? But if you go too long without addressing these emotions, you can look up one day and you're just too far gone. Brandon was eventually arrested and charged with attempted murder, robbery, burglary, false imprisonment, and child endangerment, and it's unclear if those kids were Brandon's or not. But in 2018, Brandon was sentenced to 8 years in prison, of which he's still serving. After growing up in a crowded household as a kid, chaos at the locker room and some screaming fans on the field, Brandon never got that quiet place to reflect and to get to the bottom of his darkest feelings so he could address them. And prison sucks, bro. It really ain't no way around that. But for some people, it does provide an opportunity to think, to quiet your mind, eliminate some distractions, and put you in a spot where you gotta just focus on self. Hopefully Brandon can find peace, grow as a man, come home ready to face all the challenges of a world where he's not a football player, one where he's just a man, where things get tough and sometimes there's no simple solution, where we all have our demons and we all have our struggles, and learning to deal with those kind of determine the quality of your life. Every time I ponder on the meaning of life and how to live a good life, I come back to the same thing: balance. Balance is the key to everything. And I said this before, but it doesn't always mean perfect symmetry. I think of it more as like balancing a complex equation, where both sides of the equation look extremely different, but at the end of the day, they balance each other out. Now look, it makes perfect sense to perfect your strong points, but you can't forget to bring up your weak points as well. If you a 92 overall on the football field, but a 25 off it, you got some work to do, because that 92 alone won't give you a great life. That 25 gonna pull your average down way too low. Brandon's currently working to pull that 25 up, and listening to his interview and what seems like a new level of self-awareness, bro, he probably already damn near doubled that number, and I'm hoping he could continue building once he gets out of prison. He's eligible for parole this year in 2024, so let's hope he gets himself together and comes home and lives well. But the same way you don't expect yourself to be perfect, don't expect him to be perfect, because none of us are.